Hello ladies and gentlemen, once again this is Jeremy Smith. Today we're going to be taking a look at a camera that I've wanted to look at for quite a while, but we had to wait until the right season. If I recall, this camera came out sometime in the winter time here, and that was not a good time to test an underwater camera. So now that it's summer, I figured I would go ahead and give it a go. Today we're looking at the Nikon AW1. Now in the past I have not been the world's biggest fan of Nikon's mirrorless cameras, just because they use a smaller 1-inch sensor, and because of that they don't really appeal to the enthusiast. So for me, I've been a much bigger fan of the Sony E-mount cameras with their larger APS-C size sensor, and as you guys know I do own an NEX5N, and we've talked about that some in the past. However, this is the first camera that's come out in Nikon's 1 series of cameras that's really started to, bring up a little bit of interest with me. And the reason being is because having a camera that's underwater, that's interchangeable lens, it's basically got no competition. It's definitely a niche kind of product. And I've always wanted to give some underwater photography a go, so I figured this would be a good time to do that. Now, I found that underwater photography is actually a lot harder than I thought it was going to be. But at a pool party on the 4th of July, I decided to take this camera out just to see what it would do. And I will share with you guys some of the video that I shot with this and a few of my underwater selfies that didn't necessarily go as planned. But anyways, I will go ahead and share those with you. This camera did a very good job. Its autofocus system is extremely fast. And that's something I've been very happy with about the Nikon 1 series cameras, even though I wasn't the world's greatest fan of the smaller sensor size, and I've wished for more advanced controls. These cameras have always done very good in terms of their autofocus speed, so that's a definite plus side. This camera does have GPS built in. I did find though that having the GPS enabled definitely affected the battery life a lot. In one of my other videos, I believe it was on the D5300, a lot of people were talking to me about how that really affected the battery life. And I haven't really played with built-in GPS too much, but I did hear you guys whenever you mentioned that in the comments on the 5300, so I decided to turn on the GPS in this camera. And sure enough, you guys are right. I mean, the video, not video, but the GPS really sucks down the battery. This camera is rated for about 220 shots per charge. Whenever I had the GPS turned on, and this is not with any heavy shooting by any means, after around 70, 80, 90 shots, somewhere in that range, I already had to charge the battery. So yeah, the camera companies definitely need to figure out how to get some better battery life out of the GPS, or either just build the Wi-Fi in and then have the camera set up to where the GPS tagging is done by a smartphone or tablet later on. I think that would probably be a much better idea. Anyways, let's go ahead and take a closer look at the camera, and then after that I'll show you guys a video clip that I shot with this camera, and of course descriptions are a link to the still photos rather will be in the description as usual. Taking a closer look at the camera, you'll notice that it comes with an 11 to 27.5mm lens. Now that's kind of a strange focal length, but remember I told you guys that this camera has a 1-inch sensor. So basically it has a 2.7 times crop factor to get us to an effective 35mm focal length. So that means this lens gives us an effective range from 30 to 75mm in terms of 35mm focal lengths. And yeah, it's a really good lens. It does focus fast. Obviously it's not going to be the most light gathering lens. Nikon, they do make a 10mm 2.8 lens as well for this camera that's waterproof. It is important to note that you can use the regular 1 series Nikon lenses, but of course if you use the standard ones the camera is no longer going to be waterproof. Hopefully sometime in the future we'll see some other options for waterproof lenses for this camera. It would be particularly nice to have a version of Nikon's 6.7 to 13mm ultra wide angle lens that was waterproof. Whenever I was shooting, especially underwater, I definitely found myself wanting something a little bit wider to use. So yeah, hopefully we'll see some ultra wide options for this camera in the future. Speaking of the GPS again, one reason why this camera may use more battery life in GPS mode, and of course I have no way of confirming this is just a theory, But this camera does also support a digital compass as well as a depth gauge as well. So its GPS actually gives us a lot more information. Perhaps that's why it ends up using a bit more battery life. If we take a look at the back of the camera here, so we'll go ahead and get her powered on here. As you can see on top here, we have the official specs here: 49 feet underwater and about 6.5 feet shockproof as well. We have a pop-up flash here, and I can verify that the pop-up flash actually works out pretty well underwater too, which is impressive. Looks like Nikon may have taken a page out of Sony's book with the design of the flash, which is cool. It's definitely effective. Funny thing happened. Whenever I first took this camera underwater, I had the flash down, and I saw a few bubbles coming up. I thought, oh no, it's leaking, but it was just water seeping in around the flash. But yeah, definitely I'm not used to taking cameras underwater. Anyways, if we take a look at the back of the camera here, it's laid out pretty well. You'll notice that it doesn't have any sort of mode dial or anything, which I can kind of understand that on this camera being waterproof. The mode dial, it's probably more seals and everything that you would have to have. It is more menu driven. I didn't play around a whole lot with the manual modes in this camera. If you guys want to know more about a particular part of this camera, write me in the comments below. And as always, I can always make a follow-up video about different things. If you've ever used any of Nikon's 1 series cameras before, you'll find that the options on this one are very, very similar. I honestly didn't play with the manual modes too much. I was mostly just trying to get a good photograph underwater. And yeah, I'm going to have to go back to the pool again and try this again because it didn't work out as well. But we have a pretty decent array of options here. I did find this feature cool. There's a little button right here. If you press and hold it, you can tip the camera back and forth to change modes. And that's particularly useful when you're underwater because obviously it's harder to reach for buttons and things. So this makes it very, very easy to be able to change modes whenever you're underwater. So yeah, that worked out pretty well. I'll go ahead and power off the camera so we can take off the lens. This camera does have, you have to have a pretty firm grip to get this off. And the reason being is because we have a gasket inside here, and this can be removed for cleaning. Obviously, before you take this camera underwater, you want to make sure that all of its seals are free of any debris or anything. You don't want any sand or lint or anything like that around there. So this ring does come off for cleaning. These underwater Nikon lenses have a substantial little flange there, and there's another seal inside here. So because of that, you can't use these on the standard 1 series cameras. But as I mentioned, you can use the standard Nikon 1 series lenses on this camera. It just won't be waterproof. So that's basically how that works. There is some grease in the package for the seals to keep those in good working order. Has a double locking system down here on the battery compartment. So yeah, it's pretty much very, very obvious if it's not locked. And as I said, on the lens mount, on the battery door, you also want to make sure that it's free of any debris or anything before you go underwater, because you want to be sure that this makes a proper seal. Nikon is definitely not going to cover the camera under warranty if it leaks because of you're not checking your seal, so keep an eye out for that. ENEL 20 battery, as I said, about 220 shots per charge. Not the worst, not the best, but yeah, definitely keep an eye on the GPS usage too. And then over here we have another door which has our HDMI and our USB connectors. I'm going to leave you guys with a video that I shot with this camera. Actually, I'll leave you with a couple videos. It's nothing terribly special. Just me playing around the pool. But the video quality in this is very, very good too. If you're shooting in 1080i, you can get up to 60 frames a second. If you're shooting in 1080p, you're limited to 30 frames a second. So pretty good as far as video options are concerned. I've always been impressed with the video quality of the 1 Series cameras, and this one is no exception. If you guys have anything else that you want to see with this camera, just write me in the comments below. I'll no doubt have to practice my underwater photography skills between now and then, but that's a good thing for me to learn something new. So yeah, if you have questions, write me in the comments below. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. Until next time, this is Jeremy Smith, signing off. Okay, well, this is interesting. I will say, guys, that underwater photography is much hotter than it looks. Much, much hotter. Okay, let's see here.